Okay, let us get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last session of the day. This session is called the Reading Cultural Symptoms of Korea. And my name is Dong-Shin, and I'm professor of English at SNU, and I'll be chairing this session. Although since we have three presenters and three discussants, so I don't think I need to interfere with a lot during the session. So, but I do need to introduce our team. As you know, the SNU Contemporary Korean Studies has a dozen or so research divisions or teams, each of which, as you see on the program, represent each session in this conference. Our team is called the K-Future Theoretical Experimentations, and we are focusing on exploring. I have to look it up, actually. I forgot the name of our team since it was so long ago, but it was that. So K-Future Theoretical Experimentation. And we are focusing on exploring theoretical frameworks for Korean studies and culture, especially for the future of those fields. And the three presentations we have today are part of our exploration. And we'll hear all the presentations first, or three presentations first, and then I will invite three discussants to respond to their assigned presentation. Our first presenter is Professor Stephen Choi. He is the Associate Professor of Cultural Studies in the School of Cinema at San Francisco State University. He researches and teaches in films and the media theory, and he is also the author of the Sovereign Violence, Ethics and South Korea, Cinema and in the New Millennium, published in 2016, and Refocus, the films of William Friedkin, also published in 2023. Today, he will be talking about how K-dramas on worldwide platforms produced what's called the technological togetherness under the title of the Sympathy as Symptoms, K-drama mediation and communal effect. Please welcome Steve Choi.
This is, I want to first thank the staff and the organizers and Professor Kang especially. These are ideas that I've been thinking about in response to some aesthetic and methodological issues around, and pedagogical issues around K-drama. So I'm going to start. An essay by Minju Lee describes the phenomenon of Hallyu tourism to South Korea spurred by the rise in global popularity of so-called K-culture. Lee explains how a hit K-drama can drive demand and desire for all things Korean through product placement as well as travel to locations where significant plot points take place. Hallyu, as a transnational media and tourism phenomenon, Lee writes, is possible because technology was able to successfully ferry emotions across geographic and cultural boundaries. Emotions of romance and swooning admiration are presumably among those desired by viewers who travel to Korea to become closer to the worlds and characters depicted in their favorite series. Interestingly, some viewers not fluent in Korean reportedly enjoyed watching live-streamed episodes of their favorite dramas without knowing what the characters were saying, without subtitles. What mattered more for these viewers apparently were, quote, this is Lee again, were their emotional comprehensions of the drama. These details compel further inquiry into the appeal of K-drama and the particular ways in which they compel emotion among its viewers. I've tried to address this key concept in what I've called the affective interlude. I believe that a particular poetics of the K-drama can be isolated, not in the moments where dialogue and narrative action dominate, but, as the term suggests, in those between that provide respite from the narrative's forward movement. The affective interlude is ubiquitous in the K-drama, expressing moments of sincere sentimentality, while typically featuring a character feeling something, loneliness, disappointment, resolve in the face of emotional adversity, heartbreak, but also quiet wonder, the glow felt by a character who shares chemistry with another. While struggling in a world where the constant performance of a virtuous public persona has become overwhelming, the affective interlude reveals private, tender feelings, the vulnerability of the self that is unsure whether societal pressures can be overcome. Facial expressions and bodily gestures are made into a spectacle in these moments, facilitated through slight camera movements, rack focus, and slow motion. These elements illustrate the sensitivity of a character to the world while allowing the emotional flow to flourish. It's a production of emotion summarizes the wholesomeness that is crucial to K-drama affect. In turn, the viewer is solicited to feel something as well, to feel with a character on screen through the mediation of the televisual apparatus. When a beset character expresses hardship in overcoming social challenges that are inextricably linked to the consequences of capitalism, the ideological tensions between tradition and modernity, or Korea's intensely competitive culture, the spectacle of their emotional fragility or their true vulnerable self solicits the viewer to recognize their essential virtue and sympathize with them by shedding tears. The spectacle, for example, of Dong-eun's childhood wounds in The Glory, or Eun-sang's recognition of her deaf mother's sacrifice in The Inheritors, significant moments in the plot showcase the private emotions of a character as if just for the viewer. Indeed, the sympathy solicited by the interlude is fundamental to understanding how the K-drama generates soft power, but also the therapeutic effects of the K-drama that has been reported by some viewers. But if emotion is important to understanding the K-drama, I want to draw our attention to its form and aesthetics, to the discursive means by which it solicits viewers to feel something at all. So I'm going to show a clip. This is about 3 minutes.
축하해, 나이도.
어떤 세상을 살아왔는지
보고 싶었어. 근데 봤어. 네가 보여줘서. 그래서 오늘은 웃었어. 프라우스 14권은 나왔어?
나왔어.
15권 나오기 전에 나타날게. 기다려, 기도야.
다시 들으시려면 1번. 첫 번째 메시지입니다.
보고 싶었어. 근데 봤어. 네가 보여줘서. 그래서 오늘
Okay, so my idea is about isolating these moments that are not about the story and the depictions, but about the production of emotion and sincere sentimentality that is kind of crucial, I think, to the K-drama. So K-drama mediality may be read allegorically in thinking the interactions between Kim Tae-ri's sensing body and the outdated phone technology as analogous to the body of the drama lover and the televisual technology. Both the phone and the drama are affective media that solicit and produce emotion. When she presses the buttons on the phone keypad, the ballad Your Existence by Weinstein takes over the soundtrack. Its lyrics express the thoughts of someone who is distant from the one he or she loves, underscoring her longing and the possibility of romance. In the K-drama, a sparse instrumental melody articulated through piano or guitar notes, strings, or perhaps wordless vocals convey the rise and fall of emotion through crescendos and diminuendos. Ostinato motives and percussion instruments may be utilized for more intense, heart-pounding moments. But even when the relationship between sound and image seems arbitrary, the music seems to allow the viewer to feel their way through a sequence of images. In this sense, the K-drama may be likened to opera. It is perhaps not a surprise then that characters often harbor a talent for music, whether as members of a band, classical musicians, singers and K-pop idols, or as composers. Characters who make music flesh out the affective interlude and authenticate the sincerity of their emotion, making explicit the grain of a particular body through its production of music. The affective interlude highlights these sincere emotions as inseparable from media and the worlds that mediate the human body. At issue then is the manner in which the body affects and is affected by others, other objects, and facilitated toward particular styles of being by its surrounding environments. The world of the K-drama is one that is governed not by notions of linear space, time, and logos, but by the logic of sense and affect that bring people into relation with each other. A K-drama will also often consist of only a few locations, such as a restaurant and the protagonist's apartment, but rarely does it elucidate how they traverse the space to get from one place to the next. Because these characters will typically not speak during these sequences, the affective interludes, the need for close-ups and shot-reverse shot patterns may be lessened, and instead we are given long shots of their bodies, often in deep focus, integrated into scenic backdrops. A panoramic shot of Gyeonggi Province, a seaside location with a lighthouse, a small family-run restaurant, but also the bedroom, a lonely bar, a morgue, or the roof of a high-rise building. These locations contribute to the mood of the image and may not necessarily be significant for moving the plot forward. Usually these are locations featuring open spaces that are devoid of other people, giving the drama's protagonists opportunities to allow private feelings to overflow into the space around them. The image may be slowed to emphasize and elongate these visuals. Something like a moment of vision may take place, replete with slow-motion cinematography, music, and fascinated reaction shots when a character sees and feels attraction for another within the diegesis. An image of a middle-aged man drinking alone at a lonely bar provides the opportunity to reflect on his regrets and losses. The viewer in turn, and this is all felt as somehow very moving for the viewer. But what is key here is the emotion and the sympathy. The viewer is in turn solicited to recognize the love, gratitude, loneliness, heartbreak, resignation, or quiet wonder felt by these characters. The affective interlude often revolves around characters who are powerless to act. Their only entitlement is to feel. IU in My Mister has a cold exterior because of her troubled past, but during the affective interlude, her character is revealed to be fragile and delicate, in need of protection. The display of sincere, authentic feeling through audiovisual means endears a character to the viewer. Interludes like this showcase intimate emotion, perhaps inspiring him or her to reflect on one's own life's challenges. These are feelings that are often connected to themes and narrative tropes that appear in many K-dramas: love triangles, betrayal, unfortunate upbringings, disapproving and overbearing parents, tragic illness. All of these tropes are produced through dramatic conflicts, produced through the emotional distances that hold characters apart and the consideration of the ethical quandaries that bring them together. The word affect in the affective interlude designates the potentiality of any body or worldly object to affect and be affected by another body. It spectacularizes inner emotion for the aesthetics of television, rendering it sensational, political, visceral, and morally explanatory. Its aim is to elicit a reaction, typically sympathetic. More specifically, the interlude places the body in a preparatory disposition, soliciting a comportment of sincerity in order to ready it to feel something. Affect is precisely this potential emotion, but also the trigger for feeling and actions, whether comforting or threatening, that is anticipated to be enacted upon the body. There's a new drama right now called Trigger, which is about it's not just about, the possibility of criminals in Korea getting guns, but also about emotional triggering. So what matters most is that these places house memories of affective and sentimental significance for the characters. Reading the affective interlude provides us with a key to understanding not only this significance, but also a keyhole for perceiving the styles of thinking and feeling that belong to Korean humanity. The interlude foregrounds the central role that melodrama plays in moving image narrative and instigates critical thinking about its dramatization of Korean sociality. The use of polite speech and titles, tone of voice, eye contact, etiquette signaled through gestures, etiquette while drinking alcohol, and one's ethical comportment and attitude towards others communicates moral character. To speak Korean, then, is to attend to the lang of Korean sociality and ethics. One attends to Korean sociality by remaining sensitive to how speech acts and attitudes convey sentiments, instigate offense, and express affection towards others. And my idea here is that all of this is codified through shots, through close-ups, montage. Okay, so I'm shifting to the symptom part of the presentation. So in episode, and this would be 20 minutes, I guarantee. So in episode 2 of Arthdal Chronicles, one of the main protagonists of the drama, Eun-sam, played by Jong Sung-gi, is barred from inclusion into the Wahan tribe and is told to leave the community. Belonging nowhere and exasperated, he dives into a lake as the drama enters into a short interlude. Eun-sam looks up through the blue water at the shining sun. His body suspended, the image slows down, and words previously spoken by himself and the Great Mother are heard in voiceover. These memories reiterate the drama surrounding the question of his identity. As the viewer is invited to ponder his loss of self, they are solicited to feel Eun-sam's anguish with the rising orchestral soundtrack. When Eun-sam looks at the sun, the shot shows us his point of view. And when the interlude recalls words that were said about his exile from the tribe, these are words that he himself heard previously. It's like a flashback. The slowing image and minimalist music underscore his melancholy. It is as if the natural surroundings, the sun and trees, bend in deference to Eun-sam's plight, in synchrony with the audiovisual technology and in sympathy with his anguish. The interlude does not emphasize the voyeuristic, disembodied view from outside that characterizes the pleasures of narrative cinema. A point of view shot may be deployed to show what a character is seeing and to align the image with a character's field of vision. In a reverse shot sequence, objective and subjective shots alternate to show what a character is saying and their response to what is said. The affective interlude is composed of these shots, held in a relation of separation with it to provide the objective spectacle of a subjectivity, a subjective perception, faces as affection images. Eun-sam agonizes over his lack of belonging, but this experience of anguish is an expression of an interiority that is to be observed by someone else. He is alone in the interlude, surrounded by blue water, the sky, and the sun. And while these surroundings, including the voiceover and music, all revolve around his emotion, this emotion is manifest for the spectator outside the scene, for us. The division between the subjective and objective is internal to the enunciation of the affective interlude. Yet it is this very division, the simultaneity of the subjective and objective, one inside the character feeling something and the other outside him or her, that facilitates the sympathy of the viewer. The free indirect discourse of the interviews reveals this sympathy itself to be divided in precisely the same way. An ethical comportment that dreams of becoming the other while also fully aware of its impossibility. Gilles Deleuze, citing Jean Mitry, calls this a cinematographic Mitsein, in that this perception image no longer mingles with the character, nor is it outside, it is with him. In its appeal to his or her sympathies, the interlude draws the viewer's attention to the subjective emotions of a character on screen. The affective interlude manifests, in other words, a free indirect discourse whereby the objective perspective offered by the audiovisual apparatus coalesces with the subjectivity of the character's interiority. Free indirect discourse is a literary term that points to moments within a narration when the third-person language of the narrator takes on the style and subjective voice of a character within the narrative. Correspondingly, as the psyche and inner sentiments of a character are given over to the aesthetics of the affective interlude in the K-drama, they are met halfway and projected toward the world through the objectivity of the image and sound apparatuses. In this, private emotion, which is felt only by the embodied character on screen, is made publicly available through signifiers that can be seen and heard and then intimately felt by the K-drama lover. Indeed, this emotional sense that is shared, transnational, and inspired by the K-drama may be likened to the Kantian sensus communis, particularly when we think of how Korean television and the affective interlude as they circulate on global streaming platforms. In his critique of judgment, Kant distinguishes common human understanding from the sensus communis, or common sense, in a manner that helps us understand the public intimacy potentially created among Netflix's 300 million global subscribers. Both the shared sense of emotion and the sense shared by the sensus communis are invested in elevating private experience toward universal significance in accordance with the ethics of the categorical imperative. While understanding is typically required the concept and its representation for it to be communicated, such as in language or metaphysical thinking, and made relevant for others, the sensus communis aspires toward universality without the mediation of concepts, without the assurances provided by the faculties of reason. Kant relegates this sense to the realm of taste, quote, as the faculty of estimating what makes our feeling in a given representation morally, universally communicable without the mediation of a concept. So the idea here is that the K-drama appeals to this conceptless before thinking, before talking. it's a, without mediation. So this kind of explains the emotional comprehension that someone, and I'm thinking about my students who don't know Korean language, for example, but they seem to understand what it feels like to be Korean through K-drama, which, okay. And then I tell them to read Kant, and then they shut down. Okay, and in this we may remind ourselves that the word sympathy is derived from the Greek sign, meaning together or with. If we allow ourselves to consider the affective interlude as allegorical of the way in which the K-drama produces sympathy, we can begin to understand this poetics in the age of global streaming platforms. On platforms such as Netflix and Disney+, K-dramas solicit audiences to think and feel by appealing to an always already global structure of melodramatic feeling that underpins moving image narrative generally. This structure is in turn symptomatic, whose prefix symp is also derived from the Greek sign of the sympathetic affect produced by the K-drama, one that constitutes a community of K-drama lovers and is drawn together through the globalization of Korean emotion and depictions of Koreanness. Symptomatic sympathy, let me assert here, describes the mechanism of what some might call the soft power of global K-culture. Okay. The most important interludes allegorize this very mediality through their depiction of technologies that bring individuals together and solicit emotion from their human viewers. Thank you.
Thank you for very interesting presentations. Listening to his presentation, I was surprised at how many dramas, K-dramas I've seen. Because frankly, I wasn't a fan of K-drama because of the affective aspect. Because when I was young, I thought that they were too sentimental, and now I like the K-dramas. I always thought that because I'm getting old, but now I understand why I like K-dramas and becoming part of the census communities of the global market, I guess. Our second presenter is Professor Chung-Wen Chen. He is a professor of sociology at National Cheongchi University, Taipei, Taiwan. In the past 2 decades, he has conducted extensive sociological research on biomedical, electronics, and environmental innovations in Taiwan, South Korea, and France. His current research focuses on visual sociology, economic sociology, and the sociology of science and technology. His presentation today is entitled Behind and Beyond the Logic of Imitation, From Assemblage of Chips to the K in Action, which reviews recent technological advancements, especially in the industries of electronics and semiconductors in Korea, so as to consider how such advancements are related to recent success of K-pop and food industry.
Thank you, and good afternoon. My name is Chung-Wen Chen from Cheongchi University, and it's my honor to be here to present my recent study. But in fact, this kind of study I have did for quite a long time. So I will start from a book. Yeah, it's published in 1997 by the Korean scholar In-Soo Kim, and he's not from SNU. It's a Korean university. But at that time when I visited Korea to investigate the technological innovation here, people recommended me to read this book. So I thought that his theory about the Korean innovation had reached the consensus at the time. But I doubt his arguments. So let's see here his major argument, his theoretical concentration as an imitation, from imitation to innovation. This figure shows how Korean technology can progress from the latecomer to a best player in the world. From here, we find that there's the top here as a process innovation, and here as a product innovation. For the Western advanced players, they did product innovation at first, and then they modify their process to achieve process innovation to make the performance better. It's a mainstream theory, but in Korea, it's a backward process. The Korean, just like the Taiwanese, they did the process innovation at first, and then the product innovation. That is what In-Soo Kim called from imitation to innovation. This backward process, but I don't believe that. For almost 30 years, I think we can have a new story. That is why I stand here to show you all this. Okay, In-Soo Kim's theory is that assembly is the best way to imitate the Western way of innovation. For example, for car industry, you have Hyundai and also Kia. They just assemble the component part locally and then produce the car of a Ford or even the Mazda. This is an assembly process in the beginning. And also in the semiconductor industry, you have Samsung, a lot of such kind of a company. They assemble the components from Western countries locally and then produce. So this is an assembly process, as Lim-Soo Kim called process innovation. But in my concept, this kind of assembly, or in its a theoretical term, assemblage, is not just the process innovation. Inspired by the theory of Latour and Suhill, I think the lower part of this figure is a process of assemblage. It means that it's a combination, or it's a way of assembling people, material, instruments, or even technological concepts together. It's not just assembling the component parts. So it's kind of innovation, not just imitation. So my argument is that innovation should be understood as an assemblage at least 3 levels. The first level, as assemblage at the level of form. It means that the major concern is a material, and the major actions as an instrument operation. It makes a human nature collective. At the level of concept, the major concern is knowledge, and the major actions are theoretical implications. And there is a human collective relation. And finally, there's a level of value. The governance is an action as decision making, and finally, we reach a human world collective. So I will show you the case of semiconductor innovation. So at the level of form, in fact, the assembly of semiconductors, as well as modern semiconductor manufacturing, it presents not only the assembly of electronic components, but also the assemblage of personnel, materials, and the equipment in the production process. Here, we can find the very early stage of the Samsung electronic in the 1970s. We can find here women laborers were gathered in a circle to operate the very simple machine. They were face on face. They can see each other. So you can find here, there's a space well organized. The people, the material, the instruments. So it's not just the assembling the components. So when we say the Eastern people, the Eastern labor are very indigenous, no, it's by way of well organization of the people, so we can find how they work. And as Kim said, this kind of operation is not efficient. But in my concept, it's quite efficient because we can make the product by way of assemblage. It's not just the process. This kind of configuration is already a product innovation. Okay. Also, you can find here as the target of this team is well indicated in the panel here. So the demand of the company was well indicated here. they also integrate into the human material collective. So now the assembly at the level of concept. In fact, in semiconductor innovation, they need a lot of scientific knowledge and the technological know-how. But in my opinion, the semiconductor manufacturing are not all confirmed truths. Rather, they are derived from various sources, different levels of understanding, and a diverse worldview. I can show you an example. Now, we just ignore the technological detail. I just show you by this picture. This is the conventional semiconductor device MOSFET. And this one is a modern or the most advanced device called FinFET. Their functions are the same. But this one, on your left side, this kind of a device, it reached the limitation of quantum effect. And the dimension cannot be narrow, cannot be smaller. So in the Western companies, they think that we have reached the end of the material, and we cannot overcome this kind of physical limitation. But Chinese and also Korean engineer find a new way to change the structure. You can find here, this one, the pink region, it changed from vertical to horizontal way. So it just minimizes the device structure. Why can they have this kind of imagination? This guy, a Chinese American, he just invented the FinFET structure. He taught his students how to design a semiconductor device. They just play the Play-Doh. You know that that's for kids to shape each all kind of shape. They can make everything. So it's not the truth. It's just a game. It's something outside physics, outside material science, but you can make some extra imagination into your innovation. So this kind of concept always integrated into the product or the device innovation. Several years ago, I visited Seoul National University, and I visited the Semiconductor Center, just the other side, quite far away. Yeah, this campus is quite large. And I met a guy, he just invented a bulk FinFET. It's a new type of new structure. So this kind of imagination exists not only in Chinese people, but also in Korean people. You have a kind of extra imagination, which is quite important to integrate into the device innovation. And at the level of value, you may know that there's a law guiding the development of semiconductor innovation is called Moore's Law. Moore's Law means that the dimension or the density of the semiconductor devices will advance double for about 1.8 years. So each time when people said that we have reached the limit of Moore's Law, Korean company or Taiwanese company can overcome the limitation. Why? Because they believe. Moore's Law is not a truth, not the natural law. It's kind of belief among the engineers. They think they can overcome the limitation. So it's not scientific. It's kind of value. It's kind of moral concept. So I think it's in the level of value which make the progress of semiconductor innovation possible. Okay, and also you may know the foundry. It's a specific in manufacturing technology. They don't design any new device. They just make their manufacturing process better and better. And this kind of foundry also change the structure of the industry. So it's kind of assemblage in the level of value. So here's the most law we can find here. At the beginning, in the 1970s and the 80s, always Intel. But finally, we can find Samsung and also Apple. But Apple, they doesn't make chips. It's made by TSMC. So it's Eastern Asian companies make the progress of the Moore's law. So I think Insoo Kim's model cannot explain this law. It's contributed by the process of innovation, of assembly. So assembly is a mode of K in action because assembly is an end rather than just a process. If we have the assemblage, all kinds of material, people, equipment, concept, all kinds of this, in fact, it's a kind of a Korean model of innovation. And also assemblage is the essence of Korean innovation rather than merely a phenomenon. I may say that the assemblage also is a multi-ontic action rather than an instance of ontic pluralism. Ontic pluralism is from the Track2 of Seoul because they consider there's a lot of different modes of existence. But finally, they need to combine all these modes together to explain the real world. But in my concept, the Korean model of innovation is thick. It means that we cannot separate these modes. They mingle together. It's impossible to separate them. So it's a thick assemblage instead of assemblage composed of separate modes. So that's what I call the K in action. So I will give a simple remark that Kim's book, in fact, it serves as an entry point, provide us an opportunity to enhance our understanding of the concept of imitation through the fresh perspective of assemblage. But in fact, you may know, imitation is just the outcome. Behind the imitation is assemblage, the logic of assemblage. And with the assemblage, the logic assemblage, we can go beyond the concept of innovation, from imitation to innovation. So the K-mode innovation for Korean people, I think it's highly heuristic because this perspective of assembly demands us to have an open mind to the future. It depends on Korean actors. Insoo Kim, that passed away, is a generation higher than me, and now we face a new generation. So from generation to generation, we may find different modes of innovation, but the K in action always exists. Okay, and finally, I will show you this picture, this painting. You may know that. Several months ago, I visited Hwan Ki Mitzwan again, and suddenly I found this painting just in the entrance part. Several years ago, it's not like that. Why? So I wondered, you may find this painting is made in 1956. At that time, Kim Wan-gi was in Paris with his wife, and he tried to make this painting by composing just 3 basic elements: the moon, the plum flower, and the jar. These 3 basic forms were assembled together in the painting. The moon is universal. We can see moon here in Korea and also in Paris. But the plum flower is very special for Korean people. It's something by nature. Okay, for Korean people, it's some symbolic meaning. And the jar is also very natural, but it's artifact. So you may find here 3 kind of different forms assembled together in this painting, as again, the assemblage at the level of form. And you may find that the style of this painting is abstract. It's what Hwang-gi learned in Paris, and also he accepted this concept. But he utilized the color blue. Where's the blue from? His hometown, from Cheonglado, just in the seashore. So again, he combined the color, the basic concept of his perspective, the world, with the style of abstract. So it's an assemblage at the level of concept. And finally, this painting was exhibited in the front of the Hwang-gi Misuguan. Now it becomes a very expensive, very valuable artwork. And also we called Kim Hwang-gi a world artist rather than Korean painter. So again, we find here an assemblage at the level of value. We can find such kind of events everywhere in our Korean society, because Korean society or even Korean culture is open to the future. Your language consists a lot of foreign elements, just different from the Chinese language. Chinese language should translate by meaning, but Korean language can assemble naturally the word foreign vocabulary in our daily life. So again, it's kind of assembly at the level of form, level of concept, and even level of value. So I think this may well explain what I said about K in action. K not only means Korea, but it's a special meaning for this kind of assemblage in action. Okay, so my time's up. Thank you. It's my presentation.
Thank you for a very insightful presentation. I guess we are so accustomed to this individual notion of creativity, innovations, and listening to his talk and his talks about the assemblies is, I guess, offers a different notion or concept of creativity and innovation that is very innate in our culture and in our language as well. So thank you. So our final presenter is Professor Narali Luca. She is a research professor at National Center for Scientific Research and Center for Social Research and on Religion, Paris, France. Having done her fieldwork in Seoul from 1990 to 1992 for 2 years, she has come back regularly for her researches, especially on the development of Pentecostal and Messianic churches, their various target audiences, and how they were linked to the introduction of neoliberalism in the country. Her presentation today, which is called The Rise of Neoliberalism in South Korea, Success or Failure, Dream or Nightmare, is a continuation of her research, where she particularly considers the question of how the religious beliefs of Korean Pentecostal and Messianic churches change their behavior patterns in accordance with the ideology of neoliberalism. So please welcome Professor Luca.
Okay, so I am Nathalie Lucas. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present my research field. My purpose is to show that we live in neoliberalism as fish live in water, what may seem obvious but surprises me always. For my PhD thesis, I conducted fieldwork in South Korea to understand the expectations of Korean people when converting to Protestantism. To do so, I compared the Full Gospel Church of Cheonggi, a neo-Pentecostal church, and the Messianic Providence Church of Jongmyongsok, also known as JMS, Jesus Morning Star. Both churches attempted to demonstrate that South Korea was God's chosen country, albeit in different ways. They based this claim on that South Korea was God's chosen country. They based this claim on South Korea's rapid economic development compared to North Korea's alleged economic stagnation. They explained this difference by affirming that the communist country was under the control of the devil, while the capitalist ones were under God's protection. An interesting aspect of the comparison is that the churches appealed to different social classes. The followers of the Messianic Church were either students at prominent universities or professionals in high-level positions. Thus, they were at the top of the social ladder. Their obvious socio-economic success could easily be interpreted as evidence of God's love. On the other hand, followers of the Pentecostal Church were at the bottom of the social ladder. Adhering to a theology that promoted wealth seemed more difficult for them. Nevertheless, Cheonggi taught that God showed his love by enduring the elected with his blessing. This rhetoric is called theology of prosperity. But how can you succeed when you're at the bottom of the social ladder? I discovered that they partnered with multi-level companies. Multi-level marketing companies and neo-Pentecostal churches developed hand in hand. Multi-level marketing originated in the United States. It is a direct selling method that generally involves in-home selling situations. The MLM model can be traced back to manufacturers of a wide range of goods who use independent sellers acting as entrepreneurs to sell their products. It is now quite popular throughout the world. In South Korea, the most famous multi-level marketing company in the 90s was Amway. Amway had been created by two American Protestant entrepreneurs who presented their businesses as a gift of God to enable his followers to rise the social and economic ladder. Pentecostal believers saw Amway as the end within which God reached out to his creatures and blessed them. Believers, and in particular women, really found in multi-level marketing a job and a motivation for climbing up the social ladder. In the same meeting, they combined religious and trade activities. The presence of groups that shared the same belief and professional activity gave them the courage to approach other people. That helped women to gain independence. That changed their behaviors. They wouldn't consider themselves poor any longer. Poverty was no longer inescapable. They were encouraged to dream of a better life. These new projections helped them to break away from class habitus. The more their economic capital progressed, the more the people they met provided them with a better cultural and social capital. Then, progressively, one could observe that the crowd in Pentecostal churches evolved. Of course, economic and social progress of South Korea is not exclusively due to the rhetoric of such churches and companies, but that made sense of the efforts that were requested from the Korean population to becoming one of the Asian dragons. Max Weber argued that Protestant Puritanism's conception of calling and predestination in the 18th century led to the idea that God's election was linked to wealth. To attain self-confidence in God's election, one had to succeed in worldly activities. It alone dispels religious doubts and provides the assurance of grace. Then, religious motivations played a role in transforming the economic model into a capitalist and liberal one. One could argue that the same process can be observed among Pentecostal followers. However, what I now observe above all is the ability of neoliberalism to penetrate all religions, including Buddhism, Islam, or neo-shamanism, using their doctrines to promote its ideology and transform some of them into economic enterprises. Pentecostal salespeople developed the ability to envision themselves differently and mobilize themselves to realize their visions. They became entrepreneurs of themselves, to borrow an expression from Michel Foucault. The religious message simply served to give meaning to secular techniques used to convince each individual of their ability to become what they dreamed to be, what they dreamed of being. That is to say, someone who conforms to the neoliberal ideal. Therefore, true conversion did not depend on adherence to a religious corpus, which could be replaced by another one. Rather, it was a conversion to neoliberal values, particularly to the duty of individuals to fulfill themselves economically, take responsibility for failure, endure effort and adaptability. Even though Messianic and Pentecostal church followers were on opposite sides of the social ladder, they instilled the same neoliberal or biocapitalist values: authenticity, efficiency, adaptability, and responsibility. When the Asian financial crisis of 1997 broke out, the majority of Pentecostal followers involved in multi-level marketing lost their customers and their faith. It was no longer possible to pretend that South Korea was the elected country and that multi-level marketing was a gift of God for poor people to climb up the social ladder. That marked the end of Amway's success in South Korea, but not the end of MLM companies. MWay was replaced by new MLM companies that relied on new networks more in tune with the current spiritual sensibilities of Koreans in relation to New Age, Gigong, or Buddhism. My research of multi-level marketing companies I have pursued until now conducts me to observe that they easily replaced one religious justification of hard work with another one. Expectations remain the same: economic achievement. Behaviors required remain the same: everyday hard working. The values remain the same: flexibility, efficiency, perseverance, performance, responsibility, trusting the group. These expectations, behaviors, and values were not all marks of a religious doctrine. This new adaptation of multi-level marketing companies shows, if proof were needed, that religious beliefs are optional, unlike ingrained behaviors. I am not suggesting that beliefs play no role in the economic process. On the contrary, financial development must be imbued with beliefs or ideals to be effective. This is not specific to MLM companies. Entrepreneurs all over the world believe that they are improving people's lives. I had the opportunity to interview numerous high-tech startup founders. The first thing that struck me is how important their work was to them. They were motivated by the desire to create something that should improve the lives of many people. They wanted to make their time on earth to change the world for the better for the children and future generations, or be part of a movement and participate in it every day. Ultimately, they acknowledged that they wanted to change the world, which for them meant having a positive impact on people. Like Pentecostal and Messianic churches did, multi-level marketing companies and startup enterprises offer ideals and values adapted to their specific audiences. M&M companies target those at the bottom of the social ladder, while startups target those at the top. They provide belief in something greater than oneself in order to give meaning to one's efforts. Ultimately, all of these companies fully embody the spirit of Silicon Valley, promoting its values, discourse, and success stories. At this point, religion becomes irrelevant. These companies act like secular religions. The situation is very different in large corporations where employees are expected to fulfill the aspirations of their superiors. One can observe in these big companies unadulterated forms of neoliberalism completely disconnected from individual dreams. A Dream of Iron, Cholekum, a 2014 documentary of Kelvin Kyung-kun Park, looks back at the history of South Korea's modernization in the 1960s, a time when the nation underwent drastic economic changes to rebuild from the ruins of war. The filmmaker sheds light on the working conditions of employees in Korean heavy industry. He is particularly interested in how the U-shipyard emerged, enabling South Korea to join the rank of maritime powers in 1972. The workers came for a better life and salary, but then they felt like they were being used as accessories to the blast furnaces they operated. They fought for their rights and won some battles. However, one woman says, people have become more selfish and less warm than they were at first, even though life has become easier. It's as if people have lost their feelings. The film ends on a pessimistic note. We live in a world where there is nothing to believe in. Workers are not the only ones to suffer from a lack of meaning. In South Korea, numerous students, employees, and even senior executives have lost their ability to dream and imagine their future. They suffer from being blamed for their failures and weaknesses. They don't trust anyone anymore, not even themselves. The behaviors expected in schools and businesses lead them to depression, burnout, and sometimes suicide. In his doctoral thesis entitled The Utopian Island or the Paradox of Neoliberal or Neo-Rural Migration, Jeju Island, Kang Dae-un tries to understand why around 100,000 South Koreans, more than half in their 30s and 40s, moved from the peninsula to Jeju Island in search of an alternative life. These young migrants share a common experience of being impaired by the work culture in South Korean companies. It led them to become mistrustful of others by eroding the trust capital necessary for a fulfilling social life and then diminishing their ability to build their futures. Urban to rural migration to Jeju Island then can be seen as a quest for an environment shielded from the frenzied, destructive ultra-neoliberalism of South Korea. However, these migrants bring beliefs and professions that are changing the economic landscape of the island, which is becoming a new playground for neoliberalism. But the vast majority of the employees can't leave their job. They have to endure it. Some of them try to find elsewhere something that helps them to reconnect with their own desire and dreams. With this perspective in mind, I am conducting a fieldwork on a meditation center called Ways and Stonefield Community, which was established in Tojeon some years ago by a Jesuit, Bernard Sénéchal. People may stay there a few days or for months. They have to take part in a variety of activities, working in the fields or engaging in meditation. Today retired, Bernard Sénéchal was a professor at Sogang University. He taught Buddhism. However, he didn't just teach theory. He transformed it into a practical teaching. He wanted to help students connect with their bodies. So he practiced meditation with them before teaching anything else, which was and continues to be unusual at the university. I first visited the center in 2016 when it was still under construction. I understood Bernard Sénéchal's project to be a type of startup enterprise because he wanted to create something new that would change how people perceive life and help them have a more satisfying one. Sénéchal considered himself as a pioneer. The Ways and Stonefield community shared a vision of a new spirituality that could be practiced through concrete actions in a physical space. The center is based on Catholic doctrine and Buddhist meditation. Similarly to how startup entrepreneurs criticize big companies for their vertical management, the community criticized Catholic institutions for their rigid hierarchy. Finally, like startup entrepreneurs, Bernard Senecal took several risks to create the center, including the risk of being rejected by his Catholic institution, financial risks, even health risks. He worked tirelessly and was very demanding with himself. However, he believed that all these risks were the price of liberty. Today, the community is becoming well known and is sometimes reported on by the mainstream media. If the strong mentality and the will to change at least something in the world look like startup entrepreneurs, Bernard Senecal hopes that his values and behaviors are disconnected from capitalism, achieved in the present without projecting into the future and making economic pretensions. So, I am wondering if the community is part of neoliberalism, even if it claims to resist it. Does it truly allow its practitioners to improve their everyday lives and provide them with tools to resist professional and economic pressure? What is the alternative? All of the examples I presented here demonstrate that overcoming neoliberalism seems nearly impossible. As Luc Boltanski has already demonstrated, it turns everything to its advantage, including religion. At the same time, Senecal's community is one symptom of a variety of various attempts to resist neoliberalism, which develop in different ways, but collectively express the need to reconnect with meaningful life. Thank you.
So I'm going to invite all the presenters and the discussants on the floor. So that I don't know, we have enough rooms over here, but let's squeeze. Okay, we have three discussions. Professor Kang Jae-ho from the Seoul National University in the Department of Communication, and Professor Kim Hong-chung, Professor of Sociology at the SNU, and Professor Jo Moon-young in the Cultural Department, Cultural Anthropology Department at Yonsei University. So we'll start with Professor Kang.
Hi, I'm Dong Shin-hee in disguise.
Oh.
Always confused.
No comment.
No. To make sure, I'm Jae Kang. Thanks for that. Steve, thanks for coming all the way from the Bay Area, and we are absolutely delighted to have you here. Steve's paper presents a sophisticated theoretical framework for understanding the global appeal of Korean television drama through what he terms the affective interludes. So he argues that K-drama generates their distinctive emotional power not through dialogue or narrative action, but through liminal moments that speculate sincere emotion while soliciting sympathetic viewer response. Drawing on example from 동백꽃 필 무렵, 나쁜 엄마, 눈물의 여왕, 아스달 연대기 among others, Steve demonstrates how these interludes operate through specific audiovisual techniques, slow motion, rack focus, musical accompaniment, and point of view shots to create a sense of sympathy that positions viewers with rather than outside characters' emotional experiences. Well, before I get into this, I must confess that I haven't watched any of these dramas. Yes, shame on me. I'm also certain that Steve, as a very serious critic of art film and expert on Weimar cinema, would never have spent time watching them without serious research purpose. So when I first heard he was writing about Korean melodrama, I was flabbergasted. I had to ask him, did you actually enjoy watching them? Seriously. That was my initial response, but as soon as I read his draft paper, I immediately recognized how seriously Steve approaches these dramas with theoretical authority. So, with all due respect, I'd like to say only a few words about some theoretical issues here. In my view, this paper represents a significant contribution to Korean media studies through its theoretical sophistication and methodological innovation. Steve successfully bridges film theory, affect studies, and Korean cultural analysis in ways that advance our understanding of Hallyu as both a cultural and technological phenomenon. His concept of the affective interlude provides a concrete formal framework for analyzing what he often has been discussed impressionistically as K-drama's emotional appeal. Particularly valuable is Steve's deployment of Immanuel Kant's sensus communis to theorize cross-cultural spectatorship. I don't think it's a good idea to recommend a student to read that one. I have done Korean drama studies. But by arguing that K-dramas solicit universal emotional responses without requiring conceptual mediation, Steve offers a compelling explanation for how viewers can experience emotional connection to Korean narratives despite linguistic and cultural barriers. So this is the point he really would like to emphasize here. This theoretical move locates Korean popular culture studies within broader debates about aesthetics, universality, and cultural translation. So the paper's incorporation of Laura Marx's notion of haptic spectatorship represents another significant theoretical advancement. Steve's argument that the affective interlude solicits embodied rather than purely visual engagement helps explain the reported therapeutic effects of K-drama viewing and provide a materialist foundation for understanding emotional media consumption. Importantly, drawing on Deleuze again here, the Chess' use of cinematographic myth-sign, like a Heideggerian term, this offers a sophisticated alternative to traditional voyeuristic models of spectatorship. This being with mode of viewing provides crucial theoretical tools for understanding how contemporary Korean drama creates new forms of intimacy and community across geographical boundaries. So I'm particularly interested and very impressed by Chess' sophisticated analysis of the musical component within affective interludes. His observation that K-drama soundtracks function almost operatically with sparse instrumental melodies, crescendos and diminuendos, guiding viewer response, and the strategic use of ostinato motifs for heart-pounding moments. These provide crucial insight into how these shows orchestrate emotional flow. Steve's attention to how ballads like Your Existence take over the soundtrack during pivotal emotional moments demonstrate his understanding of how music doesn't merely accompany the visual narrative, but actively shapes the temporal rhythm of affect itself. His analysis reveals how K-dramas reverse traditional hierarchies between image and sound, creating what we might call an audiovisual synesthesia of emotion. This is a point I'd like to make. So equally valuable is Steve's spatial analysis of K-drama locations and their affective significance. His recognition that these dramas operate through the logic of sense and effect rather than linear space and time illuminates how local places function not as mere backdrops but as repositories of emotional memory. The panoramic shots of Gyeonggi-do, seaside lighthouses, lonely bars, and rooftop settings that Steve analyzes aren't just scenic. They are affective architecture that house what he calls memories of affective and sentimental significances. This spatial analysis reveals how K-drama create what we might term emotional topographies where private feelings can overflow into space around them. Steve's insight that these locations typically feature open areas devoid of other people underscores how the affective interlude requires a kind of emotional solitude that paradoxically connects viewers across geographical boundaries. So in this view, Che's theoretical framework is deeply relevant for this conference's theme, symptomatology, by exploring the relationship between sympathy and symptom. His etymological attention to the shared Greek prefix symp in both terms indicate how sympathetic affect functions as symptomatic of broader cultural and technological conditions. The paper demonstrates brilliantly that the global circulation of K-drama sympathy is not merely an effect of Korean soft power, but a symptom of compressed modernization and the technological mediation of human connection in the streaming era. So it is a sort of the symptomatological reading. It leads us to understand how individual emotional responses to K-dramas indicate larger structural transformations in global media consumption, circulation, and cultural translations. So by theorizing symptomatic sympathy, Steve provides crucial tools for symptomatological analysis to examine the underlying conditions that make cross-cultural affective transmission possible in the first place. So having recognized Steve's great contribution, I'd like to point out just a few theoretical concerns and questions. Do I have 5 minutes? Okay. 3 minutes. Okay. The first issue concerns the media specificities of film and television. While Steve's application of film theory to television drama is innovative, there are methodological concerns of applying cinematic concepts like haptic spectatorship to television viewing context. So Roland Marx's theory of haptic cinema was developed specifically around the experimental and intercultural film, often viewed in darkened theater that create particular conditions of embodied spectatorship. So television viewing, particularly streaming on personal devices nowadays, involves different spatial, temporal, and social dynamics that may not support the same haptic engagement. The phenomenology of watching K-dramas while folding laundry or commuting on the subway seems quite different from the immersive cinema experience Marx had in mind. So it might be more involved with TV's tactility in Marshall McLuhan's terminology. I wonder if the paper would benefit from more explicitly theorizing the medium-specific aspects of television spectatorship and how the domestic, serialized, and often distracted nature of TV viewing, particularly Netflix-style OTT viewing, might modify haptic reception. The second issue pertains to historical and cultural specificities. I really hate this term. The paper's emphasis on K-drama's universal appeal through the sensus communis risks essentializing both Korean emotional expression and global spectatorship. While Steve acknowledges Korean cultural specificity in his discussion of linguistic politeness and social hierarchy, his argument about conceptualist universal communication potentially overlooks how effective responses are culturally learned and historically situated. The notion that sincere emotion can be transparently communicated across culture through audiovisual means deserves more critical examination, particularly given the post-colonial historicity and power differentials that shape uneven global media circulation. So how do we reconcile Steve's sophisticated analysis of Korean cultural specificity with claims about universal emotional accessibility? This tension seems central to the paper's argument, but could use more direct address. Thirdly, how can... I will stop here. So second point is how we can see the affective technique Korean television changed over time in genre. And then that would be the last question. So I will stop here.
That was a better and longer version of myself. So do you want to respond right now, or do you need time to? Oh, okay. So, Skip.
Hello, everybody. My name is Hong-Jung Kim from the Department of Sociology at Seoul National University. Before I go into my comments on Jungwon's presentation, I would like to express my kind of gut feeling after having listened to three of your excellent and fascinating presentations. I was caught by a kind of ambivalence. You know, on one hand, I really enjoyed all of your presentations. It was so illuminating and so kind of, helpful for me to learn a lot of things about Korea. And from this derived my second sentiment, which was I was a little ashamed of being a Korean, because I'm a Korean sociologist who live in Korea, and I felt like you guys know better than me the Korea, nooks and crannies of Korean societies. Yeah, so I think this is what exactly the signifier K signifies. K does not mean Korea confined into the peninsula or Korean people's relationships or phenomena, because it's so expansive and so interrelated to other parts of the world. Timely and spatially, it is itself an assemblage. So I would say that I was caught by this kind of strange feeling, ambivalent feeling. Okay, then I will go into Professor Chan's presentation. Professor Chan and I are friends for so long time, so I know him very well, and we've been talking about academic themes and theories, etc., so often. But I would like to present a little his academic career, because it may be there may be many people for whom this presentation is the first encounter with his, sciences. Okay, Professor Chan studied at Sciences Po in France. And as you know, French STS is distinguished by the work of Bruno Latour. It's strange. I studied at UHSS, like, Valérie, and they are here, UHS professors. And in UHSS, there was, Pierre Bourdieu. But I was a little critical of Pierre Bourdieu. And he studied in Sciences Po, and Sciences Po, there was Bruno Latour. And he is a little critical of Bruno Latour. So it's a kind of crisscrossing of intellectual influences, and I find it always interesting. Anyway, he knows Bruno Latour better than and deeper than any other East Asian sociologist. In Korea, Bruno Latour is not accepted, really, because there are many reluctance against Bruno Latour, because sociologists think that Bruno Latour is destroying. He wants to destroy the sociology as a discipline. Anyway, he studied A&T, and it means that he is very well read in Gabriel Tarde, who put forth his specific theory of innovation and imitation. So all those kinds of theoretical background are underlying today's presentation. I hope to help you guys for understanding this kind of undercurrent, atmosphere of his presentation. And what struck me the most in today's presentation was that he is really kind of ambitious. Means that, for me, it seems that he tried to tease out the most basic cell or principle of the Korean modernity in a specific case of semiconductor factory, or how they succeeded in kind of building up this kind of industry by inventing a specifically Chinese or Korean model of assembling things. So Deleuze called it an abstract machine, in fact, just like, some abstract principle that can be applied to many parts of the society, and it's a kind of blueprint of some reality, right? So I thought that it's a powerful and ambitious project to detect what is hidden behind this kind of dubious success of Korea. What made them in this way prosperous or in this way dark in our society? And he found out a cell that he calls the assemblage. They assembled in Deleuzian way. Yeah, he wanted to say that. Koreans are Deleuzian. They don't like Deleuze, but he says that Koreans are Deleuzian. Because Koreans are very good at making rhizomatic connections everywhere. K-pop industry, K-food industry. And at the base of all those successes lies the success of the K-semiconductor factories, Samsung. And what is the secret of Samsung? Assembling. Philosophy of Deleuze. So I want to pose 3 questions, very simple questions. First one is a little theoretical, but I will make it quick. The concept of assemblage is a little difficult, As far as I know, it came from the Deleuze notion of agencement in French. And Deleuze utilized also the rhizome or machinic connections, etc. Depends on the situation or depends on the co-work with Guattari. But in that sense, assemblage does not refer to a specific sector of the society or something, but it's kind of a principal ontological base of everything. My body is an assemblage, and our conversation and this session is also an assemblage. The Korean society is also assemblage. So by adopting the concept of assemblage, Deleuze and Guattari, they succeeded in abdicating all kinds of system-based or structure-based image of the social, right? So we have 2 different possibilities of using the word assemblage. First one is very principial, ontological usage of the word assemblage. And second one is more specific. I think those 2 dimensions are a little confused in your presentation. So I would like you, I recommend you to specify with a kind of adjective to make sure that historically specific assemblage is, for example, I don't know, K assemblage or something like that. So to differentiate those 2 dimensions. The second one is more simple. I was interested by your mention of K-pop. And if you have time, can you tell us how K-pop industry can be analyzed in light of the assemblage perspective that you explained to us? Third one, you don't have to answer this question, but I'm curious to know what would be the difference between Taiwan and Korea, South Korea. Because as I know, Taiwan and South Korea are very similar in many respects, but your theory is so interesting that I want to know that. Yeah.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you, Professor Luca, for your very illuminating presentation. I will read my discussion notes. When I read Professor Luca's presentation on the relationship between Christianity and neoliberalism, I was immediately reminded of the state-owned enterprise workers in China, in Harbin, some 20 years ago. During the structural transition of the socialist system following the reform and opening, the 개혁개방 in China, many workers lost their jobs at the time. And whether from the government, media, and the public, workers were urged to stop relying on the state and go find their ways to survive. And as I followed the daily lives of these workers, weighed down by a sense of loss, I found myself repeatedly arriving at two sites, and one was the church, and the other was multi-level marketing rallies, 다단계 at the time. So in these places, many workers sought to soothe their collective frustration and muster their determination to struggle once again in the marketplace. At the time, the government was launching large-scale re-employment projects to boost an entrepreneurial spirit. But in practice, churches and 다단계 companies were often carrying out such projects with far greater detail. So I deeply resonate with Professor Lucas' approach to neoliberalism, and not merely as a set of institutions or policies, but as a form of belief that governs individual conduct. And at the same time, since most of her work has been published in French, and I have not been able to fully grasp the trajectory of her intellectual journey, and relying only on the content of her slides left some limits to my understanding of her argument. So with the hope that Professor Lucas' insights will spark a more meaningful discussion, I would like to offer three questions by way of a full commentary. First, I would like to know more clearly how you conceptualize neoliberalism in your work. In South Korea, the term neoliberalism has generally been used as a broad label, referring not only to privatization, to deregulation that accelerated after the Asian financial crisis of the late 1990s, but also to the subsumptions of people's everyday life into the logic of market competition. So you, the Professor Luca, seem to be describing neoliberalism within this current, but at times you trace its background to periods prior to the 1990s, and even the 1960s and 70s, the industrialization, or what you call the developmentalism, 발전주의. So, and sometimes you use ultraliberalism instead of neoliberalism, so which I found somewhat confusing. So in fact, many scholars have pointed out that the term neoliberalism has been used so multiple and incoherent and contradictory ways that the term has lost much of its analytic value. And in South Korea in particular, the term has often been used as a kind of umbrella term for every kind of social grievance, to the point that its academic and public currency has begun to decline. So whenever I ask my students, why do you have so no energy at all, and then their answer is always is because of neoliberalism. It's due to neoliberalism. And then that kind of answer just make me shut your mouth like that. Okay, so I'd like to hear more about how you view this tendency, and in what sense you still consider neoliberalism as a critical keyword for interpreting contemporary South Korea. And second, you illustrate the process of a neoliberal subject formation through several cases in South Korea, 다단계 and Protestant Christianity, startup, and meditation communities. And I'm curious how these assemblages of belief reveal what is distinctive about Korean society, and especially when set against the context you have experienced elsewhere. In fact, your presentation reminded me of my fieldwork in Northeast China, which makes me think that the convergence of neoliberalism and religious practice is hardly unique to Korean society. And for example, the anthropologist Kevin O'Neill has shown how neo-Pentecostal practice in post-war Guatemala have functioned as an act of citizenship, incorporating neoliberal conduct of responsibility and entrepreneurship into a new spirit of democracy. So your framing of 다단계 and startup enterprise as a secular religion is fascinating, but again, not confined to South Korea. I conducted a comparative study of social ventures in Korea, 성수동, and social innovation startup in China, in Shenzhen area. And that at the time, I was struck by how young entrepreneurs in both countries reconstructed gospel narratives to invest their efforts with meaning. In these narratives, regardless of any ideology, the Mao Zedong or the 정주영 회장님 appeared side by side as icons of innovation, while a craze emerged for finding calligraphers, 서예가, or philosophers modeled on Silicon Valley's culture. From this perspective, the convergence of neoliberal subject formation and religious belief is not a phenomenon unique to Korea. So I would be interested to hear what new dynamics or insights you see as particularly specific to Korean context. And finally, your reinterpretation of Max Weber highlights the continuing hold of economic achievement and the cult of hard work, 근면, in Korean society. I would only partially agree with this point because in today's youth culture of wealth accumulation, what stands out is not diligence, but rather innate attributes such as bodily appearance, 외모, or the family background. So I'm sure many of you in the audience also remember the remark made in 2017 by 정유라, the daughter of 최준실. At that time, she said that parents are a form of competence. 부모도 실력이다. And as a graduate student in my department, 도우리, she has noted in her writing what once provoked widespread public outrage has now become less a target of criticism than a kind of a spirit of the times. The speculative culture normalized under financial capitalism often mocks the passion and effort of the industrial era and instead fuels new forms of status, 신분제, status stratification based on looks and assets. So I'm curious what new questions or perspectives this situation raises for you as someone who has long studied the convergence of neoliberalism and religion in Korean society. So in the final moment, you mentioned the meditation center, and then you asked, is their practice the neoliberal or not? And so I don't know. I don't have a clear answer about that. But I ask myself, is this a really important question to ask at this moment? Because that makes me looks back on my earlier study of the Korean grassroots activism for urban poor in South Korea. At the time, I also argued that how their activism has been kind of neoliberalized, and then they kind of faced the neoliberal moves. But after kind of 2 decades, what I see is there are some kind of neoliberal, so-called neoliberal aspects, of course. But on the other hand, I can also find some very resistant and contradictory and full of tension kind of aspects in their own activism itself. And then sometimes they bring kind of more the dialectical forces. So sometimes I think that the question, is that the neoliberal? I think that question prevents us from seeing the other parts of the assemblage they have made for so long. Yeah, so that is my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So as you know, we are miserably going over the schedule, but we have to, the good thing about this session is that the last session of the day, we have a lot of time actually. So we're going to hear from the presenters. And if you can, make it brief. Some of us are hungry.
So I thank you for the comments, and I just wanted to say that this is one of the best panels I've ever been on, and I'm so impressed. I'm proud, I guess, to have been part of this panel. The respondents were just so brilliant, and the presentations were truly experimental and kind of wild, and I just really enjoyed. So.
Okay, it's my turn. I will make it briefly. Thank you, Professor Kim. And you asked 3 questions. My first answer is that I need a new paper to define the concept of assemblage. But in fact, this paper is in process. So it's not the either-or problem. Yeah, so we need to find a new definition from our East Asian perspective. Okay, and my second answer is I need a second paper to treat the probable K-pop. But you may consider the case of BTS. Yeah, there are a lot of different kind of elements inside their songs, and also it's very popular over the world. So I think it covers all my 3 levels of assemblage. Okay, and finally, I'm doing in my paper. I make a simple comparison between the K mode and the T mode on the assemblage. So maybe I can develop some simple comparison after this meeting and modify my paper. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your questions. I can say that my definition of neoliberalism is Michel Foucault one. He attributes the distinctive nature of neoliberalism to its subjection of all spheres of activity to economic demands, beginning with politics and, of course, with religion. And I am still in this kind of definition. To add my own definition of neoliberalism, I would say that neoliberalism is becoming a highly centralized religion, similar to Christianity before the secularization of Western society. So it's not, of course, something a Korean situation. It's everywhere like that, like this big religion that say how you have to think to the world. So very imperialist religion. And I didn't work only on Korea, enterprises and religion, but I was interested in French one, in IT, and I follow, in fact, the effects of the link between religions, not only Christianity, religions and enterprises, and the spirit, how it helps to make people become themselves what neoliberalism wants them to be, so very good believers, are helped by bishops, and bishops are the startup which had success. So it's just to say that about neoliberalism, I think I must continue to use this term especially because it is really used by people, and people hate this word. So I think I must continue to use it and to understand how people understand it. And perhaps the second thing I will say, I don't know, peut-être. Yes, perhaps now, I think we are in neoliberalism like we were in Catholicism in the 18th century, for me. There is something like that. But every time there is line to go away, and why I am interested in this Bernard Senecal Center or other things. I was very interested this morning to the work to transgress, work to resist. Even if you resist, you are in. But how do you do to do things differently, even in accepting that you are in neoliberalism, in the sea, in fact. Perhaps I'm...
I agree, and this is one of the reasons why I came up with this idea. I wanted to offer a concept that affirms neoliberal, and essentially a neoliberal production of television. So this is my way of walking through that idea.
Okay, the Yongne post a sign that time's wrap. So thanks for So I assume the audience must have some questions, dying questions, but we're going to end here, and I believe that all the presenters and the discussants are going to stay till midnight here. So you can ask as many questions as you want. So after this, so thank you for all the wonderful questions and discussions, and thank you for staying to the end. Thank you.